I received my mother's house when she passed away. I've been living here for about 2 years, and my stepfather, who has absolutely no claim on my home whatsoever, asked me today if he could live with me because he has nowhere else to go. I told him that he could because I know my mom would want me to help him. Everything's been going pretty well while he's been living with me. He helps me keep the house clean and has been looking for work to help with the bills as well. And then, out of nowhere today, he came home with a woman named Sarah, who he introduced to me as his new girlfriend. Well, I thought she was beautiful, and she seemed like a very nice person, and then my stepfather cleared his throat and told me that she would be moving in here too. I honestly didn't know what to think, because this is my home, and he didn't even ask me if it would be okay if she moved in. That's why it kind of bothers me the most, but I reluctantly allowed her to move in, mostly because he seemed so happy with her, and I didn't want to make things harder for him. I just want him to be happy, and I want to make sure he has everything he needs in life. And if that means letting a stranger move into my home, then I guess that's how it has to be. It's been about a week since Sarah moved in with us, and she's been acting like she's the one who owns the house. Yesterday, she told me that I needed to make sure I took the trash out as soon as I get home from work, because otherwise it sits there too long and she doesn't like the way it smells. Even though we don't throw away anything that really smells that bad, I told her I would take the trash out before I went to work, because I didn't want to have to do it after I just get home from a long day. She insisted that I do it after work, because it would not be full enough if I did it before I went to work. So I just caved, and I said, okay, fine, I'll do it after work. Well, the next thing I know, Sarah comes stomping into the living room holding something between her thumb and index finger. She came straight up to me and stuck it directly in front of my face and said, "I found this under your bed." Well, I looked at it and realized that it was a dust bunny. I looked back at her and said, "Yeah, what about it?" She puts her other hand on her hip and makes this noise like she's fed up, like, "You need to do a better job at cleaning." That's what she said as she grabbed my hand and placed the dust bunny in it. And then she just walks back to her room, closes the door. I just sat there absolutely flabbergasted. Did that really just happen? I cannot understand why anybody would ever do such a thing. I'm not even the one who cleans their room. My stepfather does because Sarah refused to pick up a broom or a dustpan. I just let it slide off my shoulders and I went back to watching my favorite show. She was really starting to get on my nerves, but I don't want to argue with her because of my stepfather. But she has some nerve being the way she was in my home that she lives in for rent-free. The next day I was awoken by Sarah, literally 5 inches away from my face, trying to wake me up. I jumped out of the bed scared to death because I wasn't expecting to have somebody in my face as soon as I opened my eyes. I asked what she was doing. She said she wants to tell me that she's finished changing the layout of the kitchen. Well, I was confused by her words. Then I realized she's gone and messed with my kitchen, the one place in my home I specifically had designed to be an exact certain way. And she went and changed it. As soon as I understood what she meant, I flew out of bed. Sarah jumped backwards away from me as I got to my feet and ran out of my bedroom into the hallway towards the kitchen. And when I got there, it stopped me dead in my tracks. She moved the fridge, stove, island, and my mom's table and chairs. I just stood there for a second drinking in the view, and I could not believe she touched my kitchen. Of all the rooms in the house, this room meant the most to me because it was where my mom and I spent the most time together. I wanted to grab her and just shake her and tell her how messed up she was for doing such a thing. But I kept my cool. I turned around and she was right behind me. I had to stop for a second and think before I spoke because had I not, I would have ripped her head off with my words. I told her that I liked the kitchen the way it was before, and how I specifically had it designed so that it was exactly how I wanted it. Well, it's when I was little is how I had it designed when I helped my mom cook. Her smile faded as she realized what a giant mistake she's made. But then instead of apologizing, she literally just says this, "Well, I think it looks better this way." And then she turns around, walks out backstairs to her bedroom, and shuts the door. I bit down on my knuckles and forced myself not to scream bloody murder. Now I have to move all the stuff back to where it was, and she's driving me absolutely insane, and she hasn't even been here that long. I don't think I can handle anything else. She's going to have to take it down just a notch or two or 50. I'm going to have to make her, because I can't live like this. She's making me so uncomfortable and unhappy in my own darn home. This is beyond me at this point, so I spent the rest of the morning before I had to be at work, minding you, rearranging my kitchen back to the way it was before. As soon as I got to the fridge and got it situated, I realized I was going to be late for work. So I got ready really quick and left the house. When I got home, I was absolutely exhausted. My back was killing me from moving all this heavy appliances around. Ugh, I don't know how she managed to move it all by herself at her age early in the morning. Unless my stepfather secretly helped her, I'm really not sure. I just let my 2 rescue dogs, Max and Bella, outside to go to the bathroom, and started cooking myself some supper for the night, and then went to bed. Today's my day off, so I decided I'd just lay around the house for the day with my dogs and watch some TV. I left for about 3 hours, around 3 p.m., to go grocery shopping, and when I got home, I just put away the groceries and did not even notice that my fridge had been moved back. Again. Until after I'd already put the groceries away. I had to blink a couple times before it sunk inside my head that Sarah had moved my fridge again. I slumped into my mom's favorite chair at the table and just looked at my fridge. I'm going to have to move this sucker again, and I didn't even bother saying anything to Sarah, but if she moves it one more time, I swear. After I was done, I went in and sat down on the couch and turned on the TV. A few hours passed, and the next thing I know, I hear Sarah and my stepdad arguing upstairs. Well, maybe she should do something besides sit on the couch and watch TV all day, Sarah yelled, and my mouth dropped to the floor. I know darn well she's not up there talking about me. I'm the one keeping the house clean because since Sarah moved in, my stepfather stays in his room, only cleans it there, and I work my butt off every day except on the weekends when I'm off work. That woman does nothing but sleep, eat, moan, groan. She hasn't cleaned a single dish, swept a single floor, or wiped down a single counter since she's been here, and the Lord knows that she doesn't work. But somehow, me watching television on my day off is bothering her in my home. What else could she possibly be saying to him about me when I'm not around to hear it? And she has to know I can hear, right? I didn't hear what my stepfather said back to her because he wasn't yelling like she was. Probably because he didn't want me to know what they were arguing about, even though Sarah made that loud and crystal clear. I just took a deep breath, shook my head, and I got up and got ready for bed. I called Max and Bella to join me in bed for the night, but they didn't come running when I yelled for them like usual. Well, that's when I got nervous. I did think it was weird that they had not been with me on the couch for the night, but I figured they were somewhere playing in the house somewhere. They couldn't have gone far because I hadn't let them out, and I know they haven't run off anywhere. So, I yell for them just one more time, but still nothing. So, I got up and walked into the kitchen and poked my head up the stairwell and yelled for my stepfather. He came to the top of the stairs and yelled, "Yeah." Well, I asked him if the dogs were up there, and he said no, he hadn't seen them all night. That's when I get really worried. But then Sarah came walking down the stairs and gave me this look. Yeah, this look. I don't know what she was trying to tell me with this particular glare, but she walked past me and then gestured for me to follow. So I walked behind her as if she was going to the back door and pointed out back. I looked out the door and saw my 2 dogs chained up to a tree on the far side of the yard. They were soaking wet because it's been raining. I was furious. I yelled, "Why are they outside chained up to the tree?" Sarah turned and looked at me and said, "Because they need to go. Ugh, I'm allergic. I can't have those dogs just running around this house anymore. Ugh." Well, I was dumbfounded how she could possibly think that I would get rid of my dogs when, this is their home. They were here long before she was, and I've had them for the last 5 years, and I don't plan on parting ways. I told her there's no way I was getting rid of my animals, and they were the only thing I had. She just rolls her eyes and told me that I did not have a choice because they were making her absolutely miserable. Well, I told her that I would keep the dog downstairs from now on if it's that big of a deal, but she said that's not good enough for her. And then the next thing I know, she's screaming about how I'm a terrible person and that I don't even know how to take care of them. Well, I told her that I did know how to take care of them, thank you, and that no one else would know how to properly care for them as I do. I also told her that she was being selfish, expecting me to get rid of my animals when she could have easily just left. If she didn't like having the dogs around here, then she's welcome to kick rocks and never come back. She didn't like this answer and she starts throwing things off the countertop and smashing my mother's plates on the floor. Yeah, that's when I snapped. I screamed as loud as I could for my stepfather to come downstairs, which he did, and when he saw what Sarah was doing, he was furious at first. When I tried to explain to him why she was acting this way, he turned around and told me that I did need to get rid of the dog so she was comfortable. I just laughed at him, looked at him, and said, "Dude, are you crazy?" So I stomped upstairs and started throwing their belongings in a trash bag as they both watched me while yelling at me to stop touching their stuff. I packed up everything, and I threw all of it outside in the pouring rain and told them if they don't like living in this arrangement, then guess what? There's the door. They just both laughed in my face, and Sarah crossed her arms right across her chest and said, "Yeah, right." So I told her to laugh all she wants, but she needs to get out. Well, they looked at each other, realizing I was being dead serious. And they both walked out the door. I didn't care that they didn't have anywhere to go. I swear, I really didn't. My dogs weren't leaving, period. It's that simple. They are my dogs, for crying out loud. How could they possibly expect me to get rid of them just because Sarah's uncomfortable? It wasn't going to happen. So, I look at them, slam the door behind them, and then run outside to get my dogs out the pouring rain. I dried them off and went to bed. I guess my stepfather and Sarah slept on the street. But if they both would have gotten a job, they wouldn't be able to be in this mess, and they would be able to afford a motel, right? Or, at the very least, they could have gone to the shelter. I don't feel bad at all for my decision to kick them out. I really don't. And then my phone starts ringing. I did not recognize the number, so I answered, and the person on the other line was a lawyer who told me that Sarah was planning to take legal action against me because I evicted them without notice. I was shocked and not surprised at the same time. She'd try to sue me for such crap. I told him that's fine and that I would see her in court. How about that? So I started researching for a lawyer immediately. I found one that seemed like a good fit and gave them a call just to explain my situation a bit. They told me that since my stepfather and Sarah had no claim on the home, they did not need prior notice to be evicted. Well, I told him that they both did not even pay rent and they never contributed to anything in the house. And they were both living off me essentially. He told me to gather any receipts from any expenses that I've paid for while my stepdad and Sarah were living there. So I did just that, and I waited. And I waited. And I waited for that court date. What's up, everybody? Mr. Redito here. I hope you're enjoying the story so far today. Man, what a wild ride. Could you imagine the audacity in this lady? I mean, going into somebody else's house, you don't even pay them rent, and just acting like that, and those poor animals chasing them outside in the pouring rain. Guys, there's multiple updates to hop into, and this ride is about to get a little more wild. If you're new to the channel, just know, the best way to support me is super simple. All you gotta do is click that subscribe button right underneath this video. Click that subscribe button, and let's jump into update number 1. Well, I met my lawyer at the courthouse and we all walked in together. He told me that I had a good case, but not to get my hopes up because some judges agree with those who get evicted this way. Because technically evictions are supposed to be done at a certain way, but in our state, since they weren't on the lease, the odds could be in my favor. Once everything started, Sarah got to speak first, and she went on and on about how I kicked them out for no reason, made them sleep in the rain in the park. I was furious and wanted to scream at her and tell her how wrong she was. What a liar. But I simply could not. I just had to stand there and take it. And then the judge let me speak, and I told her everything about my stepfather, never asking me if she could live with us, and instead just moved her in, and how they weren't on the lease because I own the house. I told the judge how she tried to make the rules in my home, and how she changed my kitchen, and how she never picked up a single thing. I also told her she tried to get rid of the 2 rescue dogs that I've had for 5 years. I said that I wasn't going to get rid of my dogs for anyone, and they didn't like it, they could leave. I mentioned how they both left on their own accord without protesting. I said I gave them the opportunity to stay as long as my dogs were still there, and they chose to leave. They did not necessarily have to go if they would have just let it go. To my surprise, the judge agreed with me, and I told her that I spent $1,300 on food and other essential items for my stepfather and Sarah while they were living with me, and I even presented my evidence and receipts for everything that I paid for. And guess who ruled in my favor? The judge, making Sarah pay back every dime I spent on her when she was living with me. I was thrilled, and I looked at Sarah and my stepfather, and he had his head down while she was fuming. I smiled at her as I walked out of the courtroom, and I thanked my lawyer for his help and paid him the following day. I have my home back to normal all to myself finally, and I won the case. I do feel bad for my stepfather, but he should have taken my side over hers when it came to getting rid of the dogs. I still will never understand how he thought I would agree to such a crazy demand. I got home and played with my dogs for an hour, and then there was a knock at the door. I don't know who could possibly be knocking on the door because I wasn't expecting anyone. Update number 2. So when I went to answer the door, I opened it and there was smoke billowing up from the doormat right outside of my front door on the porch. Somebody put a bag of dog poop in it, lit it afire, and threw it on the porch. I searched the front yard to see if I could see anyone, and I could clearly see Sarah running down the block as fast as she could. I ran back inside the house and grabbed a container and filled it up with water, hurried up and dumped it on the bag and smoldered the fire. She really just was about to burn my house down, and that's when I've had enough. I grabbed my cell phone and called emergency services, and I explained to the dispatcher, there's a burning bag of poop. It was my stepdad's girlfriend, Sarah, who did it. And I told them I could clearly see her running away from my house down the block when I looked to see who was responsible. I also explained about the eviction and the lawsuit that took place, and how I won and how angry Sarah was when I left. They told me an officer would be here ASAP, and we hung up. Soon, an officer pulled up and took my statement. He said that she would probably get in a lot of trouble since the fire started to burn outside the front door. So, pretty much she would get charged with arson. I was shocked, but hey, she had it coming, right? She could have easily burned down my house by doing such a stupid stunt like this. At this point, it doesn't matter what she says. I hope she gets locked up for a very long time. The officer said that he would keep me posted, and he left. I cleaned up the mess out front and went back inside and started to take a shower. To think I allowed that woman to live in my home absolutely rent-free. That's the last time I helped any family or not, I don't care. You just never know what people are capable of these days, and I never would have guessed she would do such a vile thing. I went to bed that night with my 2 dogs safe and sound, and the next morning there was another knock on the door. So I get up and answer it and found it was another uniformed police officer. He showed me a picture and asked me if it was the person who tried to burn my house down. I looked at the picture, it was Sarah, and I said, yes, that is her. He thanked me and told me that they had her in custody and that she was being charged promptly, so I just thanked him and I left. Update number 3. I was pleased with the fact that they already arrested her so fast. Now she can serve some time for her actions. The next thing I know, there's another knock on the door, but this time it was the back door. I hesitantly answered the door, and to my surprise, it was my stepfather. His head was hanging down, just like that day in the courthouse when I won the lawsuit. He looked up at me when I opened the door and said, "Well, I'm so sorry, honey. I never knew she was so crazy. I never would have allowed such things to take place, but I loved her." I took a deep breath and told him I understand, I forgive him. He smiled, gave me a hug, and he told me that he still did not have a place to live and that he really missed being here. I told him that I wasn't sure if I could allow him back just like that after everything that went down. Well, he put his head back down and told me he understood what I meant, and I just looked at him and realized he was just as lonely as I was since my mother had passed. I knew he didn't mean any harm. He just wanted to be close to someone, except he got close to the wrong person. The next thing I knew, I was ushering him into the house and telling him he could stay with me again, but there wasn't going to be any girlfriends moving in ever again, and that he needed to get a job and pick up after himself. He hugged me, thanked me, and told me he had to go grab some of his things and that he would be back in about an hour, and he promised he would not bring anyone home this time. I laughed and said that's okay. He left and I went into the living room and sat down. I could not believe I was letting him come back, but it wasn't really him who created all of this mess. I knew as long as he didn't try to pull another stunt like this, bringing some woman home to come live with us again, that we could live together peacefully. And we did for another 6 years without any problems. I'm just glad Sarah got put away for a few years. Maybe she'll learn to have some common decency, and my stepfather and I are closer than ever, and he absolutely adores my dogs. He even told me last week that he can't believe he ever tried to get me to get rid of him. I snorted and told him, yeah, I know, right? Dogs are better than controlling old women any day. That much I guess we could agree on. I'm pretty sure anyone can agree on that, and now I'm not alone anymore. I still miss my mother, but my stepdad fills that part of my life. I'm just glad, well, I let him come back home. I wouldn't have had it any other way.